And we are back. Welcome again, once again, to the Smart to Noise Ratio Pro Audio Podcast. I'm your humble host, John Dayton. Joining me, your humble co-host, Anthony Kazubucky.
Hey there.
From the Palatial Cigar Room at SNR North American Headquarters, a.k.a. the Attic of Anth's Garage. We like cigars for our 50th anniversary celebration so much, we decided to do it a little bit more frequently.
Keep going on.
Not that we advocate smoking, kids. If you're not a smoker, don't start. But they're here, so...
Yeah, I mean, you can't let them go to waste.
Mm-hmm. That's what any good junkie tells himself, and that's what we're telling ourselves.
They're free, man. I didn't even pay money for these.
There's a new box coming in next week to celebrate the birth of baby Kazubucky here, coming up shortly.
2 new boxes.
Nice.
One of them comes with a free torch.
Very nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I had a couple things pop to mind. They're gonna have to come to mind later. We just got the one topic on the burner here tonight. Usually, lately, it's been just sort of what comes up in the
during the week
on the forums, questions that we get asked, interesting answers that we see. Had a few interesting things popped up. We did on our blog, if you're a listener and not yet a reader, check us out at smart2noise.blogspot.com. Did a little PSA on how to hold the mic. So that, guys want to cup the mic and sound like this and still want everything louder than bombs in the monitors, well, you can't have it. So check that out. That's,
perhaps you did that all for the nookie.
In a lot of cases, that's why that's done. Certainly not to have it sound good.
No.
I mean, you can do it once in a while for effect, but if that's how you're going to hold it for the whole set, you need a smacking.
That was Armand was telling me, this is a while ago, but there was an award show. It might have been the Grammys, I'm not sure, but Johnny Resnick from the Goo Goo Dolls was playing, and Fred Durst was singing with him. So what they did is they came in and they tracked all of Johnny's vocals 3 times before the show started, and they just messed with them. So in the house, there was no Fred Durst, except for when he was rapping. It was just in the monitors.
That's handy.
Yeah.
Huh. The old placebo effect.
Oh, yeah.
That's some balls right there.
It's the Grammys. They do whatever the hell they want.
Pretty much. Anyway, one of the hot topics that came up this week, and I say hot only because I got into a rather heated exchange of ideas with some of the fellow brethren of the knob and fader out there, is a rather innocent question was asked. That's
what you get for holding the microphone like that.
I haven't, man. It's just I didn't even mention that. That's one of the you catch hip hop vernaculitis there if you're not careful. One of the questions that came up rather innocently was a noob who wanted to know what the difference between an engineer and a producer was. And so the simple explanation is the engineer turns the knobs, the producer makes the decisions. And of course it's much, much more deeper than that. Those of you who know are going to be sitting back and nodding understandingly. And it's even more complex than that in the fact that those jobs really overlap quite a bit.
Now they do. Like back in the day, it was, I can't remember what I was listening to, but a producer wasn't the guy making the calls on the record. The producer was the guy making the calls to get musicians to come in or scheduling studio time. Like he was a producer, not, I guess more of a coordinator than an actual influence upon.
All right. So songs. Much like a producer, an executive producer for a movie would be, like some artistic input, but more along the lines of maybe final say over, what song goes, what song doesn't go, or track that one again, that sort of thing. And it was the guys that were really good at that eventually moved into the driver's seat as a producer calling the shots. On the engineering side, the guys, some of you may well know, the original engineers were really engineers. They were electrical engineers, acoustical engineers at places like RCA. Guys with lab coats and horn rim glasses, pocket protectors, the works. They knew the equipment inside out because they built it. Yeah.
That would be a great Real Men of Genius commercial. We should get on that.
Here's to you, pocket protector wearing audio engineer, pioneer.
To come up with a different beer to use, though. Because whatever was on that commercial was pretty bad.
Just waiting for the transistor to be invented. That's why I'm behind the console, not in front of it. But anyway, it was those sorts of types, guys that knew the gear inside and out because they were the ones who built it and were then operating it. If you were recording something, there was an engineer on site because there needed to be, because vacuum tube equipment is temperamental. Heck, any electronic equipment can be temperamental, and it was maybe much more so back in the early days. Yeah. And then as the industry progressed, and I'm going to need that in a second. I just got to get the. There was a second hidden, tricky band on this cigar that's apparently affixed with something stronger than force of will. But at any rate, as the industry sort of progressed and equipment progressed, it became possible to just buy stuff off the shelf to stock your studio with, which is how you wound up with some places, like Sun Records, Motown Records. Like those were places that were sort of set up in houses, really.
Or like strip mall-ish type places.
Right. So, and they were able to do that by, some of the stuff. I mean, like, as things progressed a little further, if you were buying a Neve console, that was something that was maybe bespoke for your studio. But by and large, you didn't have to invent the tape machine because they had been invented and were being produced. So it was possible then for people to buy this stuff and
use it.
Yeah, have their studio. But still, the engineer job was still very technical. The stuff was still very touchy. You still had to know very much about it to get anything out of it. You had to be able to fix it when it broke, especially when there were high-profile clients breathing down your neck.
And that's why you still have actual engineers or electricians or something like that on staff at bigger places. Like they live upstairs, and 9 times out of 10, you got a couple guys. Like I think I don't know if it's Abbey Road or one of the bigger places out in the other side of the pond, but they've got guys on staff.
Yeah, EMI / Abbey Road has always had air quotes maintenance guys on hand because they were one of the places. They were one of the first big studios in the world, not the first, but one of the places that was really kicking it up a few notches. And so they were starting to get guys at the console who were maybe a little more, they were there because they were a little more imaginative, a little more artistic, in touch with music, and probably still also very much in touch with the equipment, understood circuitry and what was going on inside. But like EMI in particular, like they would not put a piece of gear into service until their maintenance guys knew everything about it, had read the service manual cover to cover, had backup parts for every component inside. Yep. And there was I heard it on Pensado's place. There was one particular piece of gear that they were really leery about putting into service because there was one component that they either weren't able to identify or they couldn't get
an extra
part.
one.
Yeah, I think they wound up doing it anyway, and it was, of course, one of those storied, fabled pieces of gear.
It's probably a Fairchild or something.
So anyway, to proceed a little further, you wind up, let's say, in the heyday of recording, late '60s, early '70s, when things were really slamming. You would have your engineer at the desk who, and things are a little blurry. I mean, the guy sitting at the console might, and this all depends on the relationships, might speak up at some point. What if we tried this?
Yeah.
Musically, what if we tried this? Or, but more what that person's job is to know the gear, to facilitate the session, and to help the producer, whether that's a separate producer or a member or members of the band or whoever it is, making the ultimate artistic calls for that project to figure out how to get what their intention is, whether it's to just, make a guitar player sound as much like himself as possible, or if they're going for a particular sound, taking their knowledge of, what sorts of mics they have on hand, what sorts of preamps, all those sorts of things, EQ and effects and things to get what's in the musician's and the producer's head out and onto tape. Mm-hmm. So at those points, you really didn't have guys driving a desk that weren't very technical. They may also have been very gifted and educated in music, which, as we get up into the modern day, that's still very desirable. Yeah. And in fact, when you get to the point now where you have, I may be jumping the gun a little bit because we didn't really cover the producer side of things as much, but
not yet. We'll get there.
Yeah, that role has been sort of steady throughout up until, the point we're talking about now, like in the 70s. Right through the era of big studio productions through the 80s and even into the 90s somewhat, you still had those separate roles. Through the further democratization of music production, as the cost of gear keeps falling, by the mid '90s, it's pretty possible to get a home studio going without mortgaging your house. And that statement just becomes more and more true as time goes on. I was witness to, about 10 years ago, around 99, 2000, 2001. I had all the local garage bands coming in to record at my place, and then there was one month where some stuff went on sale at Guitar Center, and then from that point on, it was the same or cheaper for them to just buy their own crap and ruin their music at home. So, but what that led to is a lot of smaller studios, what a lot of guys call project studios or
overdub studios,
whatever they are. And it doesn't have so much to do with the size of the room, but what it is the guy behind the console, more often than not, is engineering and producing. Our friend Brian Moore over at Red Booth in Rochester, New York, is a prime example of this. Guy knows music up, down, inside out, every which way. Is just a killer musician, understands the theory, understands the feel. And so a lot of bands go to him because in addition to being a really good engineer and having decent equipment and a decent room that he understands and knows how to get the best out of, he also has a lot of insight to music. And, he'll even go so far as to play parts.
Stuff, yeah. And that's, you see that on a lot of bigger, give it a couple goes. It'll hold on.
I'll sort it out. You go say what you're going to say before you forget.
But even on some bigger projects now, like even if you look at like Katy Perry records or Lady Gaga records, wow.
I killed it. Never mind. I'm good.
But you might have killed it.
Oh, hey. All right.
You got people that are producing the entire project, that are also doing all of the samples, the beat production, the actual playing of stuff. Like Greg Wells is a really good example of that. He'll write the song and he'll play stuff on it, but he doesn't like getting too much into doing absolutely everything on it. But sometimes that can help streamline the process. Yeah, I didn't want that one.
I see why.
Yeah.
It's all right. It's just got this weird. I feel like I have cherry lip gloss on now. All right. I keep interrupting. I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. But sometimes having the control to run everything is kind of nice. Like that's the spot where I'm at with my place. Like it's not an actual, like we'll have people come in and pay money to record and stuff. But for the most part, it's a church recording studio. So if they want to record stuff from services or record ideas for songs and stuff like that, that's what it's there for. And because I play at the church, I usually end up doing triple or quadruple duty. Like I'm the guy arranging how the song's going to go, the guy sorting out. So you got from assisting with songwriting, then going to the arranging and the production of it, on how the song is going to flow. Then to the engineering of getting everything set up, ready to go, track, and then playing everything. So it's kind of nice because then that way you don't have other people screwing around with what you want to get done, but also at the same time it's kind of it's a little self-destructive because your brain doesn't work the same as everybody else's. Like I'd much rather have a different drummer come in, or sometimes different guitar players come in because they can think differently and give you different ideas as to what the song could end up being.
So there you go.
Yeah.
And like I said before, the lines are very, very blurred today. I mean, if you look at the biggest studios, like Dave Pensato's a perfect example. I don't know how much tracking he does. He's really more of a mix engineer.
Yeah, I don't think he does much tracking anymore.
But who am I thinking of? Who does a lot of tracking?
I think Jack Joseph Puig still does. Right. Not a ton. Chris Lord-Alge does.
There you go. And who would also have a producer credit on a lot of stuff.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of those guys got started as the engineer, and then people, because, during a recording process, they would say something like, hey, what if we tried this? And that stuff started picking up and selling, and then moved into more of a mixing and producing role. But if you've got the guys that are engineering the process, like the ones driving the bus, essentially, and they've got an idea how to make something better, then you throw them a couple extra bucks or stuff like that. Like Joe does wonderful things like that.
Or Joey now, not anybody. Yeah.
Yeah. Joe drives Joel will do everything from pre-production to mastering if he has to. He doesn't like to master, but he mixes all their own stuff, which is coming out sounding awesome. But we'll do, songwriting, arranging, composing, engineering, overdubs. He'll do everything, and that's kind of where everything's kind of starting to go now, because you can go and buy everything Guitar Center or wherever fairly cheap.
So when you're coming into the studio, if you're a small time guy and you own a place, you're seeing bands come in who, let's say there's not an outright producer hired. It's going to be self-produced by the band, right, and probably co-produced by the owner of the studio. Band coming in has probably more than likely recorded their own demo on their own gear, even if it's fairly simple. So they at least have some knowledge of equipment, microphones. You might have, a lot of bands have one guy in them that's sort of the gearhead, the recording head, who has studied that some, and maybe isn't up to professional level, but knows enough to help out on that front. It's easy enough to sit at a console or a control surface and push faders. So you'll see just a whole lot of collaboration on all levels in those types of situations, and that's everywhere from a Green Day with I can't think of his name now. Chris Lord-Alge.
Oh, yeah.
Or, down to, kids from around the corner going into Brian's place to record. That's the great equalizing thing about the price of gear now, is that, it's just a matter of finding somebody talented to get behind it and work with on your stuff, and that you can afford. So then the wrinkle, and this is where stuff got hot, is I in my response, I sort of did a really condensed version of what we just talked about. Started out with engineers doing this and producers did this, yada, yada, yada. Time progresses. Now you find a lot of folks that do both. But there's also this sort of second, newer definition to producer, which a few years ago, that person would have just been called a composer or a songwriter. And it was, very common for a number of years, for decades and decades, for songwriters to record demo versions, either themselves singing and playing, or hiring sidemen, or hiring a band outright to record them. And sometimes those sort of pre-production recordings would actually go into the charts. Yeah. There's I'm not going to be able to think of an example. It's going to be a little bit obscure. Not everybody might know it, but the song "Making Believe," Volbeat has done the most recent version of it. Social Distortion did it, which is why Volbeat did it. But Patsy Cline's coming to mind. She wasn't the one that first had a hit with it, but about 18 different people have had a hit with this song. But the original songwriter took it to number 4 in the charts. Yeah. But so at any rate, where that type of person would have been called in the previous years, a songwriter, a composer. As hip hop started progressing you got these beat builders who, hip hop being what it is, that is the song. And, with the climate of things being what it is, it's not enough just to have your drum machine going and, throwing a couple samples there with the turntables or a sampler. Yeah. These guys who are doing it are producing really fully fledged songs, deep arrangements. Every aspect of songwriting that goes into any other type of music is going into these beats. And so those guys have taken on the term producer. And really the reason, it wasn't so much that, I think everybody sort of agreed about that, but the problem was, and I made the crack, and, forgive me, but, I said, of course, nowadays what you get is, any kid with a cracked copy of Fruity Loops can call himself a producer, and off you go. And where the argument went from there was, okay, I didn't call myself an engineer for a lot of years, and I still don't in some cases. My partner in business is also an audio engineer, but he has an electrical engineering degree. Brandon, that we're doing some work with on this record, We're Making It Work, he's a mechanical engineer. These are guys who have the sheepskin on the wall. It's proper for them to call themselves an engineer. The reason I call myself an engineer is because of that thing that it's the evolution. The guy turning the knobs is still called the engineer, even though he's not. Yeah. And so for a lot of years, I just called myself a sound tech, or I called myself a mixer or a sound guy. Yeah. It was only really in the last few years that I felt like I knew enough about the inner workings of things, the electronics, the signal flow, just all those little nuances that's more than just pushing a fader or turning a knob. There's the whole artistic thing of, knowing what EQ is going to do to something, what compression is going to do to something. But then there's a whole level beyond that that really gets deep into signal routing, voltage levels, the way semiconductors behave in different situations, all of that really technical stuff. So anyway, like, just like I would be maybe somewhat miffed if, some kid shows up with his first SM58. And is there something crawling on me?
I don't think so.
Okay, I just feel a little... Sorry.
There are bugs flying
Giant
around.
moth.
Yeah.
So, some kid shows up with an SM58 in his first pole speaker, hands me a business card that says, John Q. Public, audio engineer. I might be a little miffed at that. I've been at this a couple of decades, and it was only just very recently that I started referring to myself, not even all the time, but some of the time, as an engineer.
Yeah.
And that garnered a couple of responses. I'm not going to call anybody out, but, a couple of these guys were like, well, yeah, I was producing for a couple of years, a year and a half, 2 years before I started calling myself a producer. And, I don't know, maybe if you're really talented, then that's enough. But knowing what I know, I'm not super educated in music, but I don't know. I feel like unless you're incredibly gifted, that's not a lot of time to really pay your dues before, but then again, if that's the name of what you do, if that's what you have to call yourself. And I guess what it really came down to is, I got accused of being pedantic. Like, do we really need to split hairs like this? And the reason I think it's important is not for my ego or anyone else's. The reason it's important is because if you're going to represent yourself with a single word, I mean, it's not like, you're telling somebody what you do, like, well, I mix live a little bit and it's this side, like if you're going to call yourself an engineer, there's a certain assumption about your level of expertise, your level of knowledge, your professionality. I change my own oil. I don't call myself a mechanic. The guys in the blue shirts down at the muffler shop are mechanics, and, the guys in the garages at dealerships are mechanics. So, and there's a wide gulf there between.
There's even intricacies in that, like, you can be a mechanic, but if you actually go to school for it, then you're a technician, and they get real upset about that. I worked at a car dealership for a while. If you call them mechanics or something like that, they're like, "No, I'm a technician,"
right?
Because they actually have a certification or whatever like that. They're certified by the ASE or something like that. But it's two different things. Like, there are mechanics that can do certain things, but a technician can, for the most part, take apart and fix and rebuild a car if they have to.
Right. With whatever their certification is, whatever realm that is.
Yeah.
So there you go. Important distinction there between mechanic and technician. Important possibly between, do-it-yourselfer. I don't know what you like. See, the thing is, there's not really an entry-level name for producing. I mean, maybe, you call yourself a songwriter or,
I feel like a lot of people with that stigma, though, would be like, yeah, I'm a producer. Like, I had a kid come in to do some voiceover stuff for they were doing a skit down in kids' church, and they needed to be like a God voice. So they were just going to hit go on a track when they were doing a skit and have God talk to him or something like that. And this kid shows up wearing like white plastic jewelry type stuff, has a pink iPhone cover, just very Orchard Park. I don't know. Like, very, very, I am privileged and I live in a very affluent town in Western New York, and I can do whatever the hell I want. Nice kid, but he's like, yeah, I'm a producer and a songwriter. Like, all right, well, what do you produce? It's like, beats. Like, what does that mean? He's like, well, I make beats. Like, do you actually make the beats, or do you just pull loops out, or like? And he's like, I did my own album. Like, all right, great. I'm listening to it. Like, if you give me 10 minutes, I can go into Logic and find those beats and do the same exact thing. So,
that's the other point I was trying to make is I feel like there ought to be another term in there for like to separate, because I feel like
programming, like on album liner notes, they're accredited with programming.
There you go. Call yourself a programmer. If you're using all stock samples, call yourself a programmer. Do the guys that have put in the time, paid their dues, learned the theory, understand the flow of music and the techniques behind it. Because, I mean, a real producer, I mean, they're deep on the Pro Tools side or Ableton or whatever it is they're using. I think the other reason the guy got ticked off at is because the example that is always a cracked copy of Fruity Loops, calls himself an engineer, calls himself a producer, like whatever. It could be a cracked copy of Logic or Ableton or Reason or whatever. It doesn't matter. That Fruity Loops is just, it's a verbal tickle for me, so I use it every time.
I had the hardest time. I used to say it all the time, like, oh, that's a real thing. You're not just making that up.
But yeah, I mean, it used to be, like, there wasn't any other thing. Like, if you said, oh, I'm a producer, I'm a record producer, you know, that doesn't mean that you devised the rhythm pattern for the drums. It doesn't mean you came up with, you know, the samples for the chorus, or, you know, like,
you didn't write the song.
You called the shots. I mean, maybe you helped with writing the song, but there's a separate thing for that too. There's songwriting credits, and maybe the producer is involved with that, but the producer is like making overarching artistic calls about the stuff
to enhance the overall
I understand
product.
that people who are producing hip hop or whatever type of music, who are building beats at home, are building complete songs. So, like, I don't know, I feel like producer sort of does them a disservice, because what they do includes so much more musicality than a producer would tend to have.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I wish there was an intermediate term, because it's, you know, if you're going to label yourself with a single word, it ought to be the right word so that people understand what you're at. Now, maybe in certain circles, maybe I am overthinking it a bit much, you know, that if you're hanging out in trip hop forums or whatever, that EDM forums, that if you say you're a producer, people understand that you're not directing the Eagles when they go into the studio.
Right. Yeah.
Like they understand that you're sitting home and you got your Ableton and your Reason and your samplers and your keyboards, and you're creating songs out of nothingness, basically, out of whatever it is that you're using.
There's the guy that actually let me borrow his Avalon for a real long time is, I'm not actually sure what he labels himself either, because he'll actually build loops from the ground up. Like, I like this kick drum, I want to do this, and draw it in, and then build an entire loop out of something, not just taking stock loops and going through. Like, that's the cheesy way of doing it, and that's what I do, because I don't like doing that.
But you're just doing demos at that point.
Yeah, I'm not, like, I've done...
That's what those are for, kids, is to build demos.
Yeah, if you really want something nice and workable. Sorry, man.
I don't know what I was thinking. I know better.
But if you've got the drive to do that, then get in there and don't just pull crap out of nowhere and try and make a song out of it. Like, if you're going to be actually producing something, that's different than thieving beats. Like, yeah, they put loops in there, so you've got a starting point, or maybe you use them or whatever. But there's, you know, it requires, I feel like, a little bit more skill and artistic ability to actually do something that you're actually creating. You're not taking, like, you're not piggybacking and taking someone else's work and using it for what you're doing to make money. You know, I've been thinking about this since we started. One term to describe yourself. One of my friends had I still love what he calls himself. He's a decent media big shot around here. Like, he, you know, when there was the NHL lockout, he was running camera one at the Republican National Convention, Democratic National Convention. He shoots the Super Bowl. He shoots all that stuff. And he's the media director for the Sabres and everything. He doesn't call himself a media director. He calls himself a solutionist.
Whoa.
That's deep.
That's heavy.
Like,
problem solver.
Yeah, like solutionist. I read that. I was like,
that's what I get labeled when I go places, no matter what I'm doing, whether I'm an electrician or whatever. Like, man, you're a problem solver, which I'm pretty proud. Maybe I should just put that on my business card.
Solutionist. Like, that's, you know, I don't know if I could come up with one thing to label myself. I don't want to get into that. I do a lot of stuff, and some of it I'm better at than other things, but it comes down to it. I'm the guy that weed whacks at the church.
First and foremost.
First and foremost, lawn care, and then
I mean, with such skill and
after.
finesse that really, if you saw his work, you wouldn't be surprised that that's at the top of his resume. Those weeds, they stay whacked. They respect the authority.
See some of the, I mean, if you got an aerial shot of the campus, the artwork,
the shading that you're able to. I mean, you talk about a tight fade. Man has the skills of a barber with a Husqvarna.
You get just off to Transit Road just enough you can see a crow's nest.
But to dip back a little bit, like to talk about those varying degrees, because obviously on this program we sort of, I feel like our audience is less people who are producing and more people who are engineering. There's the tracking engineer, the guy who's there during the recording process. There's the mix engineer, who's maybe a little bit more artistic, in a more artistic position. And then you move on, you've got a mastering engineer who's taking that mixed product and just giving it that last little push. Some would say it's as simple as just, turn the volume up, add some bass and a little compression, and then you turn it loose. It's,
some people do that, but the really good guys, I mean...
You take a listen, and sometimes you don't do anything.
There's a reason that you can win Grammys and awards for mastering. Brian Blackwood did it last year, 2 years ago. Good God, I don't know how many Grammys Bob Ludwig has, but
yeah, there's a reason.
Yeah,
but Anthony, between just him and I, he's really good at tracking. So like he might label himself, once you get into that, past the first 10 seconds of conversation with somebody, what do you do? I'm an audio engineer. Oh, really? What specifically? Well, I'm largely, I do it all, but my favorite thing is I'm a, tracking engineer. Yeah. And me, what I found out is interesting is I always thought being a live engineer, I would be great at mixing records, and I can do it. I have enough skill to turn out something that's acceptable and you can turn in. Although more often than not, I'm actually not mixing studio tracks. I'm mixing live tracks that I've taken from an event, which present their own challenges because they were often set up to play in a room, in a specific room through a specific PA. So a lot of things were done to those tracks first. But at any rate, I find that when confronted with professionally recorded tracks, I'm at a bit of a loss. But you hand me a 2 mix, for some reason I'm pretty good at mastering, and I think that has to do with somewhat the way I learned how to live mix, where I frequently step back and take in the whole thing. I mean, not just what's going on stage, but I'm looking at the wider thing, like what's the feel that's going on here? Are the people enjoying themselves? Are the bartenders hopping? What's the overall atmosphere feel like? And then what can I do to enhance that through the music? So that's how I operate when I master. I probably wouldn't describe myself as a mix engineer when we're talking about the studio side of things.
Yeah.
And then on the live side, there's another whole range of things you can do. You can be a front of house engineer, which is, for you noobs, the guy he's got the mixer that you can see out there in the middle of the crowd. You've got a monitor engineer parked on the side of the stage where usually just the musicians can see him, taking care of wedge mixes and in-ear mixes and something else. You can have guys out in a media truck or a recording truck, tracking those things and packaging them for other venues and methods of delivery. You have a system engineer who isn't doing much at all during a show except hanging out, ready to put out fires. But
when that guy's not there,
he's the guy who's on the ground at 8 a.m. when the rigging points are being set up and making chalk marks on the ground and making sure noise comes out of everything and tuning everything up to suit the room before he hands off to the mix engineer. And that might be the same guy on a smaller tour. One guy might...
there's one system tech. Well, I mean, smaller tours, I think when Carl was out on the road, he did pretty much everything. I think he did monitors from front of house because it wasn't a big tour.
Oh, yeah. It's quite common on the truck and trailer, the van and trailer tour circuit for the tour manager to be, the band engineer, mix monitors from front of house, do any recording, any additional playback. Like they're sort of the all-encompassing, and they're required to drive so many of the hours on the road and handle all the advance. Handle the advance not just for techs, but hotels, fuel, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
On a real small tour, things get hectic for that guy. That was what I did on mine. We had a tour manager who was not the least bit capable audio wise, despite having a studio at his house. So he handled all the.
He was a producer. Bam.
But when I was on tour, I was mixing front of house, mixing monitors from front of house, handling any playback, any recording. Drove the bus almost exclusively because I was. Honestly,
the only one licensed to drive a bus.
Yeah, well, that, and I was just too paranoid to let anybody else take a turn. I was too much in fear for my life.
West Virginia gets hectic with a bus.
My least favorite sign in the world to this day is that one
with the truck.
The arrow going around a sharp corner and the truck on 2 wheels. Like, it makes my asshole pucker.
The shit's about to get real sign.
yeah, that's sign. United States highway sign for. It's about to get real. But I digress. So anyway, you got anything else to add to that? Well, I think if there's anything else I saw in the forums this week to...
Not really. No, that was it. We got pretty good in that one topic that we...
Well, at least we had something.
About.
At least there's something. I have no problem making it a short show. I actually just had a thought. I had a couple thoughts, actually. I was actually pondering, partly as a self-serving thing and partly to build my chops as a mastering engineer. I had the iPod on shuffle the other day while I was driving to work, and, excuse me, some Iron Maiden comes on, and I got it cranked, and I'm rocking out, and I'm like, man, I'm reaching for more bass because the kick drum's just not that prevalent because it was the 80s, and the kick drum didn't make your pant legs flap in the 80s. It hit you in the chest up around like 150, 200. And then something more recent comes on, like, I don't even know, and I think it was maybe like a more recent Testament track or Avenged Sevenfold or something like that, something that was sort of produced to the nines. And I'm just so sick of that. Like what's it called? The Apple thing that normalizes everything, or supposed to.
The
sound check.
Yeah.
You click on sound check, and it's supposed to analyze all your music and balance it so that one song isn't screaming loud. But it goes beyond that. I mean, sound check sort of works, but it can be tricked sometimes too. Like I realized that there was one song by The Cult, Love Removal Machine, that the intro was just long enough that it was completely inside whatever the sampling window was for soundcheck to look at. So as a result, it was the loudest track by like 12 dB, louder than anything else on my iPod, because it was like, oh, this is a very quiet song. I shall turn it up for you. And then the song would kick in. Like if I had it on shuffle at a gig for, pre-show or, between the sets music, if that song came on, I knew I had just the length of that intro to fight my way back to the board to turn it down, or I was going to blow people away. But anyway, I thought about taking my whole iTunes library, which actually isn't that many songs, because I don't, if I like a song, I don't load the whole album. I just load that song.
Yep.
So it disappoints a lot of people when they go through my iPod and they're like, what, you only have 3 Pantera songs? I'm like, yeah, those are the only ones I wanted to hear. If I want to hear another one, I'll download that one.
Yeah.
But and there's a lot of stuff on there that I don't actually listen to at all. So I thought about it, like, all right, if I picked the 200 most listened to songs, got them all into a version, converted them all to waves or whatever, so I can hack them and then get them into a session, master them all so that they all kind of feel the same or about the same level, and then kick them all back out again.
That's interesting.
Because, I was listening to it. Run to the Hills came on the radio today, and, like, there you are, broadcast radio, pumping up the volume, slamming down the compression, and I already had the bass boosted a little bit, and I'm just, it goes through that intro section, man, the kick drum is just not hitting. And once the song starts, like, it fits very well for that, but I'm like, man, how far music has come in the last 20 years or so that, that used to be an exciting kick drum. You heard Run to the Hills come on the radio, and you're like, yeah, Iron Maiden, dude, woo, turn it up, man. And now you hear it, and it's like, man, what a pathetic, limp-wristed, anemic little smacky-smack kick drum that is.
Yep.
So that and the other philosophical thing that was running through my head, and you see these things come up all the time, is like, they'll put side by side in one of these memes, something written by, Dave Mustaine of Megadeth, or a Queen song, penned largely by Freddie Mercury, next to a Lady Gaga song, which Girl's a Genius. I mean, I'm not going to.
Nicki Minaj is the one that usually.
They put it next to a Nicki Minaj song or a Justin Bieber song. And baby, there's 27 words in the verse, and 26 of them are baby.
The other one's technically a letter. It's not even a whole word.
But, listening to stuff like that, where you had the total package, you had killer songwriting, and it got me to thinking about, and maybe this doesn't apply to our audience much, but maybe it'll help you out as you're helping out the musicians that come to you to work with you, if you're studio guys. But, writing something like these new songs that you get, and this kind of pop crap has been around forever, where it's just very safe. It's about, puppy love, or a relationship gone south, and baby, I'm always going to love you, or, or even if it's a more edgy song and it's about addiction a little bit. Songwriters that write deeper stuff, they take a little bit of a risk, because even though they might be writing about some of those same things about, falling in love or a relationship ending or being addicted to something, like, I had Megadeth on the brain big last week, so like, and I'm not going to be able to come up with a current pop stars. Well, I pick any Taylor Swift song, I guess, and put that up against, Dave Mustaine writing something like Trust or Almost Honest that go really, really deep into the issue of, and without overtly saying it either. I mean, he doesn't come right out and you're like, oh, baby, you're always telling me lies and blah, 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 I don't trust you and stuff. I mean, he very artistically crafts this image of a relationship, that's just very twisted and like, how can I trust anything you say? And, these trust issues that I have with you are just, go to the root of other trust issues that I have. And then he's like somehow works a booty call into it at the break. Like it's some pretty deep stuff.
When you say it that way, you wouldn't think it'd be a heavy metal song.
Right. Well, where it goes to the 12-string plucked part.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know, you metal fans will know what I'm talking about. But, and then compare that to We Are Never, Ever, Ever Getting Back Together. Or, like Unisong, what was it? I was watching one of the Madagascar movies with my kids, and that has that song Firework in it. I don't know whose song that is.
Oh, Katy Perry.
Sure. Okay. Whatever. Fill the name of blank of soon-to-be drug-addled and in rehab pop starlet. And it's a cool song. I mean, it makes my kids dance, and they don't know nothing from nothing.
Right.
And the lyric, it made the hair on my arm stand up. She's got a great voice. Like, the only thing that was really sort of lacking was any depth to the writing. Like, man, what a loss. Like, here you have this great song.
Her old stuff was really, like, before it was Katy Perry, when it was Katie Hudson, Brian Moore. Did you see Brian had
when they were in the same...
They were in the same magazine, because she used to, like, her parents run a real big church in Ohio, I think, and, she was a Christian singer starting out, and everyone told her that with what she was writing, she would never make any money, so she said, screw it. Like, the Christian labels wouldn't pick her up and take her big, so she's like, I'm done with you guys, and now probably one of the biggest selling musicians out there. But her older stuff was really good. Like, the production was, like, the recording quality was amazingly bad. Like, you hear cars driving by and stuff, but like the older songs are really good. Like, there's still a lot of stuff that she writes with a lot of people now too, but there are some songs that are actually have a fair amount of depth, like the radio singles don't, but that's why the radio singles.
Yeah. All right. So to tie this in with our previous topic, and to help you guys out who are, either are or are looking to be better producer engineers, here's how you can help your clients out. Personally, when I'm tracking somebody, I don't voice my opinion a lot unless I'm really feeling something like, boy, that really sounds stupid. I don't know what, but you need to try something different. Or that thing that you did before was really, really good and you should probably call it back at some point. Those types of advices. But, I don't know, if I had been a guy sitting on that firework session, like, it would have been cool to be able to stand up and be like, look, this is great. Like, your voice is giving me chills. The music that your people have built for you is making my head go up and down. Tracks are so cheap as to be essentially free, and paper's cheap. Why don't you sit down and see if you can write something a little deeper? Like, that could have been. I mean, that was a million-selling song. It was a huge pop song. It was on a movie soundtrack. It's all it's still getting played on the radio.
Soundtracks, I think.
It's all over the place. So, huge song, and not for no reason. But man, I feel like that could have been one that's still getting played 20 years from now if it meant something. If it wasn't just sentiment. If it actually had something to grab hold of you, and maybe it's. I guess that's the way people are writing now. Is just put something safe out, put up something that it's up to you, the listener, to put your own meaning to it, or you're going to hear this during your formative years, or during when good things are happening or bad things are happening to you, and this song is going to always tie back to that. Well, that's true for anything. I mean.
Yeah,
the sound of a garbage truck reminds me of when I lived on, whatever street when I'm back in my college days.
Neuropaths are crazy. The one with actually now I'm thinking about it. Both Katy Perry's actual albums. There's both of them have one song towards the end. It's different. It's not. It's more rocky on both of them. I can't remember the name of the one on the first album, One of the Boys, but the one on the second album was Hummingbird Heartbeat. And it's all live stuff. And on both of them, I found out later, Josh Freese played drums on both of them. There it is. That's where. But
that's that mojo making my head go up and down.
Yeah, of course it's Josh Freese. But those are better songs. They weren't sampled drums; they were real drums. I don't know if it's her or the producers or wanted something a little more
rock and roll. Because I feel like she's okay with doing all the pop princess stuff, but at the same time, like, she is actually a musician. Like, she can play stuff, she can write songs, she's got a killer voice. So maybe that's that one B-side that the artist really wanted, but everyone else was like, fine, yeah, whatever. We'll just get Josh Freese or somebody to play drums on it.
So yeah, I mean, without generalizing too much, like I get so tired of these answers that you hear on podcasts and articles that you read about. Well, it really depends. You just have to listen to the music and make good decisions. But yeah, that's a double-edged sword. Tracks are so cheap that you could do 1,000 versions of a guitar solo. There's something to be said for, know what you're doing and just do it, and take a couple of versions, pick the best one.
Put them all together.
But yeah, the same thing. Like, I think probably a huge piece of advice that young songwriters could use, and probably even some pros, like, but talking to the guys with the home studios, the small project studios, and just encourage your writers that are coming in. Be like, listen, come up with some alternate stuff. Because one thing I see, like, even bands that have it down, like good musicians, 4 or 5 guys that can all come down on one together, which
sounds a lot harder than it is for most people.
I'm not belittling that at all. That's quite an accomplishment to have, especially when you're into some of the heavier stuff like metal or performers who can all come down on one together. Guys that know their instruments well and have great tone and play great licks and great hooks and stuff like that, and singers with good voices. But a lot of times what'll be lacking is the songwriting, because, and here's the method, like, everybody else in the band to get their stuff together for the album has worked through numerous different iterations of stuff, the rhythm patterns, the lead lines, the harmony parts, all of that stuff has been hashed through. Whereas the lyrics, a lot of times, and I'm not presuming anything here, I mean, I'm saying this from direct experience, the singer wrote verse 1, chorus 1, verse 2, same chorus, bridge, solo, verse 3, chorus, end.
Yeah.
Why not write 15 verses? Do it right there in the studio while we're waiting. But
because American Pie is awful. No one likes that song anymore because it's got 15 verses. I'm not saying
use all 15 of them, but if you're going to tell, let's say it's a narrative song where you're explaining something from beginning to end and resolving it.
Bob Dylan-y type.
Sure, write 12 or 15 verses and then back up and chop it off, or go through and pick out the best ones, or meld a couple together that serve the story well. And as a literary advisor, maybe you're not the best person to do that. Maybe you are. I mean, maybe you're the triple threat as a small studio owner. But and just knowing that that's how everybody else went through their process, encourage the guy writing the lyrics to do that same thing too. When it's time for vocal overdubs, bring some versions. Sing them out there, hear them back, and paste stuff together.
It's nice to have. I mean, like back in the 60s and 70s, you got like bands would go in and write an album at a studio.
Yep.
You got Led Zeppelin booking out Headley Grange and writing the 4th album. I don't know if they wrote it all there, but at least that there's something kind of cool and magical about not having the world around you at all, like being totally almost desert island style. Like, okay, fine, you're gonna live in this house. We're gonna get you 3 cases of whiskey, ton of cigarettes. There's a phone number for women,
all the coke and hookers you need.
Yeah, well, pretty much. And
actually, I'll go ahead. There's a side note to that I want to get in.
Coke and hookers
and Mick Jagger, but Mick Jagger. In that order.
I don't know which one's worse out of all 3, and I like the Rolling Stones, but having everybody together, because now a lot of times it's singers writing all the lyrics themselves, and then they bring it to the band, and maybe they play guitar or piano and they've got a basic idea, and then everybody kind of jumps on top and puts their thing into it and stuff. But older stuff, like very story type stuff, like Rush stuff, like Neil Peart writes all the lyrics, or with Led Zeppelin, Jimmy Page wrote a lot of this stuff. It's kind of, it gives a different aspect than just the singer,
Yep. Well, at any rate, the the reason that went on, that whole move into the studio thing, because that was definitely not the case at first. I mean, there were whole records made in a night for a long old time.
I think the first Led Zeppelin album was they had enough money saved up for like 12 hours, and they just did like 4 takes every song and pressed Led Zeppelin 1.
Yeah, same thing with Black Sabbath. I mean, that was done in a maybe 2 nights. I forget exactly my.
We can watch it again.
History. But, from the dawn of recording, it was, like, all right, it was a little bit, when they were cutting lacquer direct, you just,
straight.
You came in, you got a couple of takes for each song. If it wasn't working, on to the next one. And, you had a record. Well, you'd be cutting 2 sides, basically. So you'd cut side 1 until you got a good cut, and then you'd cut side 2 until you got a good cut. All right, thanks for coming in. And that persisted even as tape was evolving. I mean, you had guys like the Beatles really sort of moving into a studio, but even I think if you look, the early days of EMI, like the Beatles didn't move into a studio. They were in the studio a lot, but they were, in for a day, in for 2 days, off to play these shows, off to play the BBC, whatever, be on TV, come back, get another day or 2 in the studio. Anyway, the reason moving into the studio became a thing and became chic was at some point when British bands started rolling in dough, the British version of the IRS was having a field day with them. They were just bending them over. So the loophole in the law was it only applied to records that were recorded within the kingdom. So the Stones and everybody else started just renting a chateau in the south of France, which could be done relatively inexpensively, and just move in. And then you could do all the coke and hookers you wanted and, show up drunk in a fur coat and do whatever. But it did lead to, some more thought out things when your bands were spending time all together as opposed to, spending time apart and playing the music they'd already written on tour.
Yeah.
Devoting time to creating an album became the thing then. And bands started doing it in the States, block out a month or 3 months or a year or whatever at a studio in LA. They were doing it because they wanted to create albums that were up to snuff with the Stones and the Led Zeppelins and, whoever. I think Fleetwood Mac's a great example of that. I mean, they would just occupy a place. I mean, own it outright just about. Because, they had that desire to really make sure all the elements were there and really spend the time sort of woodshedding it away from other things. So,
and having everybody there all at the same time is great. Like, it just turns out better. Like, there's, even if you're not all tracking at the same time, like having everybody in the control room or having them on campus somewhere. It's like, all right, we got drums done for this. Everybody come and listen to it. See how, what needs to. Well, you've got everybody's input. Nobody gets, their feelings hurt more than they already typically are. And
just sort of direct opposite of like a CCR, where Fogerty would write everything, write all the lyrics, all the parts. The band would show up. He would teach them their parts. They would track them, kick them back out, and he'd track all of his stuff and all the vocals. But like a couple of the real shining examples are like Queen, which has enjoyed the title of greatest band in the world for a period of time. Some would even still consider them that, and it's arguable. But, they would move into a studio, but for a relatively short period of time. Like, what was it? Bohemian Rhapsody was one of the the most expensive single at the time they tracked it. But I watched a whole documentary on the making of that album. They weren't in the studio that long. I think 3 weeks, maybe. And that was sort of typical for them. Like, they would all be writing ideas and parts and maybe cutting the odd demo here and there, but they really came together and got the whole thing done all together in, I'm going to say, less than a month. And the ones that really get me, the guys who are the king daddies of this and to this day do their records this way, Iron Maiden.
Yeah.
Because of their tour schedule and, their hectic tour and partying life, they just didn't have the time to come up with anything. They're out doing dates for 2 years straight. They just weren't in a position to write anything. So they would go and, I saw Steve Harris, the bass player, was on the Metal Show one night. He's like, every record we come in, we'd book out 2 weeks, sit down, write it, record it, get out the door. And the one time we decided to be cool and go for a month and, really dial everything in. We spent 2 weeks at the pub, realized we were fucking off the whole session, and then spent 2 weeks and got the whole album done. But man, they kind of get knocked around as being one of these comical old metal acts, but their stuff still stands up in terms of songwriting. Like they're still, those guys are still on tour, selling out soccer stadiums in South America. Which I don't know the last time you tried to sell 1/3 tickets to something. That's not easily done.
Yeah.
So anyway, there's not really any reason for that. That came to mind when you talked about renting a chateau in the south of France. So, all right.
That I guess I don't know if you got anything else, but there's I guess lastly touching on the producer thing, one of my favorite kind of nudges from I feel like the engineers, like the actual engineers that build consoles and stuff. There's the producer section of the desk, which is like a flat piece of metal for you to put your notes on and stay the hell away from everything else.
It's usually fairly close to the volume knob for the monitors, and that's about it.
Oh, yeah, we've got a producer's room. It's the other side of the building. Go. You produce from there. We'll let you know when we're done.
Yeah, I've actually seen consoles designed with like a separate headphone out and a separate volume control for the producer. Not that headphone work is all that common in the rock and roll scene. So, all right, well, there you have it. Started out on a fairly light topic, managed to make almost an entire silk purse out of a sow's ear there, or vice versa, such as the case may be. But anyway, going to say all the stuff I usually say. Ica will eventually get you on. Liam, a couple of the other guys we've been hoping to get on the show here. I promise you we will sort this out. It just keeps not being the end of the busy season for us. Like I find myself a rigger. Actually, this is, we'll see if there's a podcast after the 4th of July. It'll be a miracle because I'm being pressed into rigging. We just bought a new screen at work. The oversized bed sheet we've been using for years it's bumming us out a little too much. So we priced and purchased a new screen. It showed up on a truck, all 30 glorious feet of it, all rolled up. And it actually made out a little bit. The shipping weight I thought was going to be like 1,250 pounds. Turned out it was only like 850. So 10 guys showed up, like 15 guys showed up when the truck came up. Our building emptied out and all able-bodied souls got a hand on the thing. I think 10 people got it off the truck. Jeez. And the packaging has to be half the weight, I'm thinking. I couldn't find a flown weight for the thing. But I have a 30-foot long object that I need to get 26 feet in the air. And I can't use the pick points that are on it to hoist it because they need to be ready to go to rig it once it's up there, like to dead hang it. So I had a bit of an issue. But anyway, what I settled on was Genie Lift makes a pair of crank towers that, you've seen them at smaller shows where they take up the onstage truss on these things. They got like a little fork that sticks out of them that you chain the truss to or strap the truss to, and they go up. The ones I rented go up 25 feet. I think actually trim height is something like 23 or something like that. So 600-pound capacity each. So I think either one of them could lift the thing alone, but I'm going to get those two.
Both and get it evened out.
Yeah, and it's pretty easy for, instead of, 10 guys and 10 pulleys and 10 picks trying to yank this thing out and keep from bending it and distorting it and stuff. Like we can just have 2 guys, like, all right, we're going 10 clicks. Crankety, crankety, crankety. Okay, guy on the right, come up 1 more click. Crankety. Okay, we're going 10 more clicks. And then, before you know it, it's safely 20-some feet in the air. And then another guy can go up the man lift and chain it off and level it and such. So it's not that scary, except that I still have to put an object weighing several hundred pounds and attach it to the grid in some sort of meaningful way that means it's not ever going to shift or come down on my musicians.
And be totally okay for fire code.
Yeah,
when that comes up.
Fortunately, I have a rated grid in my place, so I know I can chain off to that. I've got no worries.
Cool.
I have a solid connection to building steel. So, the long story short, kid, the lesson on rigging is if you are not a rigger, don't rig.
Don't.
Just say no to rigging.
Yep.
I know some about, actually, the maintenance guys are going to be the ones that ultimately have say about it. Like, I'm merely suggesting methods for lifting it, and I'm going to show them the manual. Actually, I went around and around with guys. Like, well, what are you going to take down that traveler track for? Just hang it off of that. I'm like,
No.
Yeah, the manual for the screen doesn't say it's okay to hang it from a traveler track, and I haven't seen it, but I would guess that the manual for the traveler track doesn't say it's okay to chain rig a screen from it. So I'm going to say no, because it might work fine, but if anything ever happens, they're going to turn to the surviving members of the family and ask them what they would like to name the church they just became owners of. That's all that is. It's straight up liability. It goes way. It's beyond safety or anything else like that. So we can follow the directions to a T. Someone who is not me is going to be ultimately responsible for making all the calls that day. Yep. And that's how we're going to proceed. So let's see. Blog. We have one of those. We update it sometimes. I got 3 posts up last couple of weeks, so things have been going relatively well. Even got a mini podcast out that we've been promising for a long time. You can find that at smart2noise.blogspot.com. Check us out. We'd love to have you. Value your input, your comments. One of these days, I'm going to get the podcast set up for better RSS so that you can just get it in your podcast software or get it in your email or whatever you want. I have not forgotten that promise that I made. I will either draft the 15-year-old intern into doing that for me, or I will sit down and figure out how to do it myself shortly. And what else? I promised somebody else I was going to get an email address going for the blog so it would be easier for people to hunt us down and ask us questions. Because that kind of let up for a while. Like we had people, our close friends, Ika and Liam and a couple of those other guys will email us fairly regularly. But as far as the general public reaching us, I feel like we can make it easier for them. So we're going to do that. As for your other audio needs, if you're looking for great stuff to read, anything that says Bobby O on it, Bobby Owsinski, look up the books, check out his blogs, 2 of them. And he actually just became the music commentator for some financial rag. I forget. It was on his blog the other day. So he's also going to be writing for, I don't know, maybe not the Wall Street Journal, but somebody like that. What else? Pensado's Place is a favorite among ours. The Home Recording Show. I've just been working through those. Those are a little bit shorter podcasts. They're about 20, 25 minutes. They do a lot in the way of giving like real good dictionary or encyclopedia. Ripped off from Wikipedia. I didn't say that. What? But they give real good examples, audio examples, explanations. So if you're a noob and you're looking to learn some stuff, one of the guys is also a live engineer. So he dips into that a little bit. That's a great resource. For sort of the opposite end of things that you're going to hear on Pensado's Place or the Audio Nowcast. And as always, Reddit. Thank you, my brethren of the Knob and Fader from the Reddit circles. Thanks to everybody for dropping in on those forums and making them what they are, for keeping them one of the most genteel places to share and discuss ideas about audio. And all right, that's all I got.
That's about it. Let's wrap that.
Wrap it. Let me just check here. Okay, so thanks once again for tuning in, and we will see you next week if you're lucky.
Have a good night, guys.